I opened the latest message. It was from Beatrice. Kiara, please pick up. Preston is in serious trouble. The feds are circling. He is going to be arrested. We are about to lose the house, the church position, everything. You have to help us. I stared at the glowing words, feeling absolutely nothing but a cold, calculating satisfaction. Preston was my white brother-in-law, a so-called elite luxury real estate developer who always looked at me like I was dirt on his expensive Italian shoes. My older sister Serena married him to solidify her status as the ultimate Southern belle. They were the golden couple, the pride of my mother life, and now their perfect facade was crumbling. Miss Kiara, the executive across the table, asked nervously, "Is everything all right?" "Everything is absolutely perfect," I replied, my voice smooth and steady. I pressed the pen to the paper, signed my name with a flourish, and officially closed a $50 million deal. Then I turned my phone face down. Let them panic, let them sweat. They owed me a dozen years of suffering, and I was about to collect every single cent with interest. To understand why I felt no pity for the people sharing my bloodline, you have to understand the night my childhood officially ended. I was 17, a straight-A student working 2 jobs just to afford college applications. Serena was 20, the undisputed golden child of the family. She was gorgeous, charismatic, and desperate to pledge Delta, the prestigious sorority our mother and grandmother had belonged to. It was a strict family legacy, and Beatrice was obsessed with making sure Serena got in. The problem was Serena had an expensive lifestyle and a massive spending habit. One rainy Tuesday evening, the church financial board called our house. $5,000 was missing from the youth group fund, a fund my mother managed, and Serena had access to as a volunteer. I came home from my shift at the diner, soaking wet and exhausted, only to find my clothes shoved into black garbage bags and tossed onto the front porch. The rain was coming down in sheets, soaking through the cheap plastic and ruining everything I owned. I walked into the living room, water dripping from my hair, to find Beatrice standing over my bags with a face twisted in rage. Serena was sitting on the velvet sofa clutching a brand new designer handbag and crying fake dramatic tears. "How could you do this to our family?" Beatrice screamed, stepping toward me with her finger pointed right at my face. "How could you steal from the house of God?" I froze, completely blindsided. "I did not steal anything," I said, my voice shaking. "I have been at work all day. I barely even go to the church office." "Do not lie to me!" Beatrice yelled, slapping me hard across the face. The sting radiated through my jaw, but the shock hurt worse. "Serena confessed that she saw you take the bank envelopes from my desk. You did this because you are jealous of your sister. You wanted to ruin her chances during rush week, because you know you could never get into a real sorority with your nappy hair and your terrible attitude." I looked at Serena. She would not meet my eyes. She just hugged her new $5,000 bag closer to her chest. She had stolen the money to buy the bag and bribe her way into the right social circles. And instead of holding her accountable, my mother was throwing me under the bus to protect the family image. A scandal would ruin Serena's sorority application and Beatrice standing at the mega church. So they needed a scapegoat. They needed the family disappointment to take the fall. "Tell the board you took it," Beatrice commanded. "You are a minor. They will just make you do community service. If Serena gets charged, her life is over. I am not taking the blame for her theft." I said, my voice dropping to a low, steady whisper. "I refuse." Beatrice grabbed me by the collar of my wet jacket and shoved me backward toward the open front door. "Then you are no daughter of mine," she spat. "Get out of my house. Get off my property." She shoved me out into the freezing rain and threw the last of my garbage bags at my feet. "You will come back begging on your knees in a month," she sneered, looking down at me from the dry porch. "You are nothing but a worthless piece of trash. You will never survive without me." The door slammed shut, the heavy deadbolt clicking into place. The sound echoed in the storm. I stood there shivering, the rain washing away the sting of the slap. I did not cry. I did not bang on the door. I bent down, picked up the heaviest garbage bag, and walked away into the darkness. I promised myself 2 things that night. I would never be poor, and I would never ever forgive them. Now, 12 years later, the people who threw me away like garbage were desperately trying to reach me. I picked up my phone and finally opened Beatrice's message thread. I typed a single simple response. I will meet you tomorrow at noon. Bring Preston. Then I hit send, grabbed my briefcase, and walked out of the boardroom. The game was finally beginning, and I held all the winning pieces. The restaurant I chose was located in the heart of Buckhead, an establishment where the menu had no prices and the waitstaff memorized your preferences before you even sat down. I arrived 10 minutes early. I wore a bespoke charcoal suit crafted from Italian wool. It had no visible logos, no flashy hardware. True power whispers while fake wealth screams. I ordered a sparkling water with lime and waited. My posture relaxed, my mind sharp. Right on cue, 15 minutes late, Beatrice and Serena made their grand entrance. They moved through the dining room like they owned the place, performing for an invisible audience. Beatrice was wrapped in a vibrant silk dress and a wide-brimmed hat that practically screamed for attention, clutching a designer bag featuring a logo so large it bordered on comical. Serena trailed slightly behind her, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors and a tailored jacket that I instantly recognized from 3 seasons ago. They looked exactly as they always had, desperate to project an image of untouchable Southern aristocracy. My mother slid into the booth across from me. She did not offer a hug or a greeting. Instead, her eyes scanned me up and down, pausing on my unbranded suit and bare neck. Her lips curled into a familiar condescending sneer. Well, look at you, Beatrice sighed, adjusting her massive handbag on the leather seat. I suppose I should be grateful you bothered to show up. I see you are still dressing like a bank teller. I had hoped your little corporate job might have taught you how to present yourself, but clearly some things never change. I did not react. I just took a sip of my water. It is good to see you too, Mother. Serena scoffed, removing her sunglasses to glare at me. Let us skip the fake pleasantries. We do not have time for it. Preston is dealing with a massive crisis, and you are going to help us fix it. I raised a single eyebrow. Am I? That is a rather bold assumption, Serena. The last time we spoke, you watched our mother throw me into a rainstorm so you could buy a bag that looks remarkably like the outdated one you are holding right now. Beatrice slammed her hand flat against the table. We are not relitigating the past, Kiara. The Lord tells us to forgive and forget. We did what we had to do to protect this family legacy. You were always too stubborn and difficult. But right now your sister needs you. Her husband needs you. We are facing a minor cash flow issue, and you are going to do your Christian duty to support your blood. A minor cash flow issue. That was certainly one way to describe an impending federal indictment for embezzlement. I folded my hands on the table and leaned forward. If it is so minor, why are you calling the daughter you disowned 12 years ago? Before Beatrice could fabricate another pious excuse, a heavy hand slammed onto the back of the booth. Preston had arrived. My brother-in-law was exactly the type of man who believed the world owed him a favor simply for existing. He was tall, wearing a custom navy blazer that stretched slightly tight across his midsection, his blonde hair perfectly styled. He exuded that specific brand of arrogant pseudo-elite white privilege, carrying himself as if he were the smartest person in any room he walked into. He did not look at me with desperation. He looked at me with open disdain, as if I were a servant who had kept him waiting. He slid into the booth next to Serena, barely acknowledging my presence before flagging down a waiter to order a scotch. Look who finally decided to join civilized society, Preston said, unbuttoning his jacket. I am going to make this quick, Kiara. I do not have all day to sit around catching up. Your mother tells me you have some mid-level management job at a finance firm up north. That means you have a decent credit score and probably a modest apartment. I remained perfectly still. My silence seemed to encourage him, validating his assumption that I was intimidated by his presence. Here is the situation, he continued, leaning over the table and invading my personal space. The real estate market has been sluggish. I have millions tied up in luxury development assets, and the banks are being unreasonably tight with their liquidity. I need a short-term bridge loan to cover some operational costs for my firm, a temporary patch, nothing I cannot handle. He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers, slamming them down right in front of my water glass. This is a loan guarantor agreement, Preston announced, tapping the top page with a heavy gold pen. You are going to sign it. It uses your apartment and your personal credit to secure a $300,000 commercial loan for my company. I stared at the paperwork, genuinely amazed by the sheer audacity of this man. You want me to take out a $300,000 loan against my own name to fund your failing business? It is not failing, Preston snapped, his face flushing red. It is a temporary liquidity issue. You clearly do not understand how high-level real estate works. This is standard procedure. I am offering you the privilege of helping this family. Once the market bounces back next quarter, I will pay off the loan, and I will even give you a receptionist job at my firm. A real job, not whatever paper-pushing nonsense you are doing right now. It is a favor, Kiara. Take it. I slowly looked from Preston to Serena to my mother. They sat there with their shoulders squared, completely unified in their delusion. They genuinely believed I was a desperate lower-class relative who should be honored to risk my entire livelihood for their fake empire. They had zero concept of who they were actually sitting across from. They did not know that the suit I was wearing cost more than Serena's entire wardrobe, or that I could buy Preston's entire miserable company with the spare change in my checking account. I picked up the heavy gold pen Preston had tossed onto the table. I rolled it between my fingers, feeling the cool metal, while 3 pairs of eager, greedy eyes watched my every move. They thought they had me cornered. They thought the traumatized 17-year-old girl was still hiding inside me, desperate for their validation. I let the silence stretch out, savoring the heavy tension in the air, preparing to deliver the first devastating blow. I stopped rolling the pen. I placed it gently on top of the ridiculous stack of papers. A soft, genuine laugh escaped my lips. It started as a low chuckle in the back of my throat and quickly grew into a full, resonant laugh that echoed over the quiet hum of the restaurant. Preston stiffened instantly, his arrogant smirk melting into a deep, furious scowl. Serena shifted uncomfortably in the booth, clutching her counterfeit designer bag closer to her chest, as if my laughter alone might damage it. Are you finding this amusing? Preston growled, leaning his heavy frame across the mahogany table to invade my personal space. I am offering you a lifeline. I am offering you a rare chance to be part of something bigger than your sad, isolated little life. A receptionist job at a premier real estate firm is more than someone with your limited background deserves. You get to answer phones for high net worth individuals. You should be thanking me on your knees for giving you a foot in the door. I wiped a mock tear from the corner of my eye. Thanking you on my knees. You want me to mortgage my entire life, put my name on a highly illegal commercial loan, and hand you $300,000, and my grand reward is answering your phones. Preston. The sheer delusion it takes to make that offer with a straight face is almost impressive. I slid the contract back across the table, tapping the signature line. The interest rate you hit on page 4 is predatory, and the collateral terms are a fast track to personal bankruptcy. The answer is no. Not now. Not ever. Preston slammed his fist on the table, rattling the expensive silverware and sloshing Beatrice sparkling water over the rim of her glass. You listen to me, you arrogant little girl. You do not walk away from this table. You owe this family. You owe Beatrice for raising you and feeding you when you were nothing. You are going to sign this paper right now, or I swear I will make sure you never find work in this city again. I know people in Atlanta. Powerful people. White executives who listen to me. Your powerful people cannot even save you from a minor cash flow issue. I shot back, my voice dropping to a glacial chill that cut right through his bluster. Do not try to intimidate me, Preston. I am not the frightened teenager you all threw away. I know exactly what this is. You do not want my help. You want a scapegoat. You want some naive, financially illiterate black relative to assume your toxic debt so you can buy yourself a few more months of fake luxury before the feds come knocking. Serena gasped, her hand flying to her chest in mock outrage. How dare you speak to my husband that way? He is a respected businessman. You are just a bitter, lonely woman who cannot stand seeing me happy. You have always been jealous of my marriage, my status, and my beautiful life. You are trying to sabotage us because no man will ever look at you the way Preston looks at me. Your life is a house of cards, Serena, I replied calmly, locking eyes with my sister. And the wind is already blowing. That was the exact moment Beatrice realized her usual tactics of dominance were utterly failing. I was not shrinking. I was not cowering under the weight of their judgment. So she deployed her ultimate weapon, the psychological weapon she used to rule her church congregation and terrorize her daughters into submission for decades. A public, highly theatrical meltdown designed to weaponize respectability politics against me. Beatrice threw her hands up intentionally, knocking her water glass off the table. It shattered loudly on the hardwood floor, drawing the immediate attention of every single diner in the upscale restaurant. She let out a loud, agonizing wail that sounded like a wounded animal. "Oh Lord," Beatrice screamed, burying her face in her hands while her shoulders heaved with exaggerated sobs. "Lord above, why are you testing me with such a wicked, ungrateful child? I gave her everything. I carried her in my womb. I fed her. I clothed her. And this is how she repays my boundless love." The entire dining room went dead silent. Waiters froze in their tracks, carrying trays of expensive food. Wealthy patrons at adjacent tables turned around, their eyes wide with shock, watching the spectacle unfold. Beatrice knew exactly what she was doing. In the tight-knit, respectability-obsessed culture of upper-class Atlanta, public shame was supposed to be the ultimate compliance tool. She expected me to panic, to frantically try to quiet her down, to sign the papers, just to stop the unbearable embarrassment of a scene. She pointed a trembling finger at me, fake tears streaming down her perfectly contoured face. "Look at her!" Beatrice cried out to the room at large, ensuring her voice carried to the furthest corners of the restaurant. "Look at this spiteful, hateful creature. We come to her in our hour of deepest need, offering forgiveness, offering to welcome her back into our loving Christian arms, and she spits in our faces. She hates her sister. She has always hated Serena because Serena is beautiful and married to a wonderful, successful man. She is eaten alive by jealousy and sin." Preston puffed out his chest, playing the role of the protective patriarch, putting his arm around Serena, who was now producing her own fake, delicate tears. Beatrice kept wailing, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "She wants to see us destroyed. She wants to see this family ruined out of pure, malicious spite. Help us, Jesus. Deliver me from this demonic daughter." The restaurant manager was hurriedly making his way over, looking absolutely terrified of the situation and unsure how to intervene. I sat perfectly still, letting the circus play out. I did not break a sweat. I did not flinch. I let the silence stretch from my end, allowing Beatrice to look as unhinged and ridiculous as possible. The diners, who were initially shocked, were now exchanging uncomfortable, pitying glances, but not toward me. They were looking at my mother like she had lost her mind. I picked up my leather handbag and stood up, smoothing the invisible wrinkles from my bespoke trousers. My calm, collected demeanor stood in stark contrast to their absolute hysteria. "Are you walking away?" Preston shouted over Beatrice, dramatic, crying, his face purple with rage. "You walk out that door and you are dead to us. Do you hear me? Dead to us." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a crisp, newly printed $100 bill. I dropped it gently onto the table, right on top of Preston's fraudulent loan contract. "This covers the sparkling water and the broken glass," I said, my voice carrying clearly and smoothly over my mother's loud sobs. "As for being dead to you, Preston, that happened 12 years ago in the pouring rain. Enjoy your minor cash flow issue." I turned my back on them and walked toward the exit. I did not rush. I did not lower my head. I walked with the slow, measured pace of a woman who owned the world. Behind me, Beatrice's shrieks reached a fever pitch, demanding that the manager call the police on me, demanding that someone stop me. Nobody moved. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the restaurant and stepped out into the warm Atlanta afternoon, leaving my toxic family to drown in the public humiliation they had built for themselves. The warm Atlanta afternoon sun beat down on the hood of my car as I drove back to my office. I felt a profound sense of clarity. The restaurant scene was exactly the confirmation I needed. My family had not changed. If anything, their desperation had only magnified their toxicity. I spent the rest of the day in a series of board meetings, completely unbothered by the pathetic display I had just witnessed. But a wounded narcissist never retreats quietly. They regroup and they retaliate. By the time I returned to my penthouse that evening, my private phone was vibrating violently against the marble kitchen counter. It was not phone calls this time. It was a relentless stream of social media notifications. My personal accounts, which I kept entirely separate from Onyx Capital and mostly used to follow industry news, were exploding with hateful comments and direct messages. I opened Instagram. My sister Serena had mobilized her army. With over 500,000 followers, Serena had built a lucrative brand as the ultimate aspirational Southern housewife. Her grid was a carefully curated mosaic of expensive brunches, designer outfits, and staged moments of marital bliss with Preston. But tonight she had pivoted to a new genre: victimhood. She had posted a 10-minute video. The thumbnail featured her sitting on her pristine white sofa wearing no makeup, her hair pulled back into a messy bun to convey authentic distress. The lighting was perfectly dim. She had set the stage for a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. I hit play. Serena took a deep, shuddering breath before looking directly into the camera. "Hi, everyone." She began, her voice quivering with expertly practiced vulnerability. "I usually only share the positive parts of my life here, but today my family is going through something incredibly painful. I need to be honest with you all. I have an estranged sister. We have not spoken in 12 years because of her severe untreated mental health issues. My parents and I have prayed for her, we have loved her from afar, but today she did something unforgivable." Serena paused to wipe a perfectly timed single tear from her cheek. "My husband Preston has been working tirelessly to build a real estate firm that serves our community," she continued. "And my mentally unstable estranged sister showed up out of nowhere to sabotage him. She has held on to this bitter, deep-seated jealousy of my marriage and my happiness for over a decade. She is spreading vicious lies to his investors and trying to ruin his business out of pure spite. I am terrified for my family. Please pray for us." The video had already amassed 250,000 views. The comment section was a cesspool of outrage directed entirely at me. Her followers were rabid, validating her victimhood and demanding to know my identity. But Serena was only the opening act. The main event happened 2 days later. Sunday morning arrived. Beatrice, never one to be upstaged by her own daughter, decided to leverage her ultimate source of power: the megachurch. As the head of charity and the wife of a prominent church elder, Beatrice commanded the attention of 10,000 congregants in person and tens of thousands more via the church live stream. I did not have to attend the service to know what happened. Someone sent me the clip. Right before the final hymn, Beatrice took the stage. She gripped the wooden podium, her head bowed in a portrait of holy sorrow. She asked the entire congregation to bow their heads and join her in a special prayer. Lord Beatrice projected her voice to fill the cavernous sanctuary. "Today I come before you not as a leader, but as a broken-hearted mother. I ask this church family to pray for my youngest daughter, Kiara. She has allowed the devil to poison her heart. She has turned her back on her blood, choosing the path of vengeance and greed. She is actively trying to destroy her sister family. Please, Lord, touch her wicked soul. Cleanse her of this demonic jealousy before she destroys herself." The congregation erupted into a chorus of amens and murmurs of sympathy. Beatrice had effectively weaponized a massive religious institution, painting me as a villain in a holy war. The fallout was immediate and vicious. My inbox became a war zone. I received hundreds of messages from people I had never even met. Some were Serena mindless followers threatening to find my apartment and teach me a lesson. Some were from Preston racist pseudo-elite fraternity brothers, calling me every derogatory name they could think of, promising to end my pathetic little career. The worst came from the church members. They sent me aggressive Bible verses telling me I was going to burn in hell, calling me a Jezebel, a traitor, a bitter woman who needed to find Jesus and apologize to her saintly mother. They wanted me to feel hunted. They wanted me to break down, delete my accounts, and crawl back to them begging for the harassment to stop. It was the exact same playbook they had used when I was 17, just on a much larger digital scale. I sat at my kitchen island, sipping a glass of iced water, watching the hateful messages scroll rapidly across my screen. I did not shed a single tear. I did not feel a sliver of anxiety. Instead, a cold, absolute calm washed over me. If they wanted to play a public game of annihilation, I was more than ready to oblige. They had brought social media tears and church prayers to a financial war. They were wildly outmatched. I picked up my phone, ignored the hundreds of death threats, and dialed a secure encrypted number. It rang exactly twice before a sharp professional voice answered. Elias speaking. Elias was the chief investigator at Onyx Capital. He was a former forensic accountant for the federal government and a man who could find a missing dollar bill at the bottom of the ocean. He was ruthless, brilliant, and completely loyal to me. Elias, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. I have a new target for you. I need you to pull every financial record, every tax return, every bank statement, and every hidden shell company connected to a man named Preston. I want his luxury real estate firm dissected down to the subatomic level. Consider it done, Elias replied without missing a beat. What are we looking for? Preston claims he is dealing with a minor cash flow issue, I explained, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. But a man does not beg his estranged, supposedly lower-class sister to sign a $300,000 predatory loan just to cover a minor gap. He is hiding something massive. He is bleeding out. I want to know exactly where the money went, who he owes, and how long he has before the dam breaks. I will have a preliminary report on your desk by tomorrow morning, Kiara. We will tear him apart. I ended the call and set the phone face down on the marble counter. Serena and Beatrice thought they held all the power because they controlled the narrative on the internet and in the pews. They did not understand that real power does not need an audience to operate. Real power moves in the shadows, follows the money, and strikes only when the trap is completely shut. I was going to let them enjoy their online sympathy for a few more days. I was going to let them feel victorious. And then I was going to dismantle their entire fraudulent existence brick by brick. The next morning, at exactly 6 o'clock, the private elevator to my penthouse office chimed. Elias stepped out holding a sleek black encrypted hard drive and a thick stack of printed financial ledgers. His face was unreadable, but the sheer volume of the physical files told me everything I needed to know. Preston was not just drowning, he was already at the bottom of the ocean. We set up in my main conference room. I poured 2 cups of black coffee, handed one to Elias, and plugged the hard drive into my secure network. A cascading wall of data filled the 3 massive monitors lining the room. Bank statements, wire transfers, offshore shell companies, and property deeds flooded the screens. There were no monologues needed. We spoke the universal language of numbers, and the numbers were screaming a story of absolute fraud. Look at the main operating account for his primary development firm, Elias said, highlighting a column in bright red. The cash flow completely dried up 24 months ago. I scrolled through the documents, my eyes darting across the dates and routing numbers. I traced a line from his flagship corporate account to a series of Delaware-based limited liability companies. These were classic ghost entities. They had impressive-sounding names like Apex Global Properties and Summit Heritage Holdings, but they had 0 employees, 0 physical offices, and 0 actual revenue. His firm went bankrupt 2 years ago, I stated, dropping a printed balance sheet onto the glass table. Every single development project he pitched since then is a phantom. The luxury condos downtown, the high-end commercial retail spaces in Midtown, none of it exists. He does not own the land, he does not have construction permits, he is selling thin air. Elias tapped the screen. It gets worse. Watch how he moves the capital. I leaned in closer, my eyes tracking a massive wire transfer of $500,000 from a private investor. The money hit Preston's main business account. Within 48 hours it was fragmented. $50,000 went to a luxury car dealership for a down payment on a new Mercedes. $20,000 went to a high-end boutique in Paris. Another $100,000 was immediately wired back out to 3 different individual accounts, labeled as quarterly dividend returns. My blood ran cold. It is a Ponzi scheme. Exactly, Elias confirmed. He is not building real estate. He is hunting for fresh capital to pay off his earlier investors just to keep them quiet, while skimming off the top to fund his wife's fake luxury lifestyle. That $300,000 loan he tried to force you to sign was not for a minor cash flow issue. It was to pay off a very angry investor who was threatening to audit him. You were supposed to be his next sacrificial lamb. The sheer scale of the deception was breathtaking. Preston was walking around Atlanta acting like the supreme white patriarch, treating me and everyone else like peasants, while his entire existence was financed by a criminal scam. But a Ponzi scheme requires a constant, steady stream of new, trusting investors. Preston lacked the charisma and the actual industry track record to lure in smart institutional money. He needed a hunting ground. He needed a place where people were highly successful but also deeply trusting. Cross-reference his investor list with the church directory, I ordered, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. Elias's fingers flew across the keyboard. A new algorithm matched the names on Preston's fake investment portfolios with the donor registry of Beatrice's megachurch. Dozens of names lit up in bright green on the monitors. I stared at the screen, a profound sense of disgust washing over me. It was an affinity fraud scheme, and it was sickeningly calculated. Preston was targeting the wealthiest, most successful Black professionals in Atlanta. Doctors, lawyers, successful business owners who had built their wealth from scratch. These people attended the church seeking spiritual community and fellowship. And there was Beatrice, the beloved, highly respected charity director, introducing her charming, polished white son-in-law to the congregation. She was handing him the keys to their bank accounts. Beatrice vouched for him, I said, tracing the names of the victims. She used her religious authority to give him an unearned halo of trustworthiness. He preyed on Black wealth, and my mother literally held the door open for him. The racial dynamic of the scam made my stomach turn. Preston looked down on Black people. I knew it. I had felt his racist condescension my entire life. Yet he was perfectly happy to drain their hard-earned generational wealth to buy his counterfeit luxury. He saw the church congregation not as peers, but as naive prey. And Beatrice and Serena were so obsessed with the proximity to his supposed white prestige that they gladly served their own community on a silver platter, just to maintain the illusion of their perfect family. Does your mother know he is running a Ponzi scheme? Elias asked, pulling up another set of personal banking records. I studied the screen. I do not think she knows the technical mechanics of the fraud, I replied. Beatrice is arrogant, but she lacks the financial literacy to understand how a shell company operates. However, she absolutely knows he is broke. You do not ask the daughter you threw away 12 years ago to take out a predatory loan unless you are desperate. She knows he is drowning, and she is willing to sacrifice anyone, including her own congregation, to keep the ship from sinking. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city. The sun was fully up now, casting a harsh, unforgiving light on the streets below. My family thought they were playing a game of social media chess. They thought posting fake tears on Instagram and organizing church prayer circles would force me into submission. They had completely underestimated the war they had just started. Print everything, I instructed Elias, turning back to the conference table. Every fraudulent transfer, every fake property deed, every list of the victims from the church. Organize it into physical binders. We are going to need hard copies. Elias nodded, already hitting the print commands. We have enough to send him to federal prison for decades. Do you want me to forward this directly to the FBI white-collar division? Not yet, I said, a razor-sharp smile forming on my lips. If we send this to the authorities now, he gets arrested quietly. Serena plays the victim of a deceptive husband. Beatrice claims ignorance and cries on the altar, asking for the congregation's forgiveness. They survive. They always survive by spinning the narrative. I walked back to the monitors, staring at the list of church members he had robbed. I do not just want him in handcuffs, I continued. I want the entire illusion burned to the ground in front of the very people they lied to. I want their credibility eradicated. We are going to buy his debt. Every single toxic loan, every angry creditor he is dodging. I want Onyx Capital to own it all by Friday. I am going to wrap this financial noose around their necks and I am going to pull it tight. Elias left the boardroom to begin the aggressive debt buyout, leaving me alone with the glowing monitors. The sheer volume of Preston's financial crimes was staggering, but my intuition told me the picture was still incomplete. Ponzi schemes of this magnitude are sloppy, they leak. And Preston was a remarkably sloppy man who thought his white privilege was an impenetrable shield. I sat back down at the glass table and pulled my laptop toward me, bypassing the standard financial databases and tapping directly into a dark web forensic tool Onyx Capital used to trace heavily encrypted offshore transactions. I keyed in Serena's maiden name, her married name, and the tax identification number for my mother's charity department at the church. If Beatrice was handing Preston individual investors on a silver platter, I needed to know if she had handed him the keys to the kingdom itself. The screen flashed processing for 3 agonizing minutes before a hidden directory cracked open. My breath caught in my throat. This was not a list of wealthy church members. This was the master ledger for the Genesis Orphanage Fund, the crown jewel of the church philanthropic efforts. It was a massive tax-exempt account built on the donations of thousands of working-class Black families who gave their hard-earned tithes every Sunday to help displaced children in Atlanta. I scrolled down the ledger. A thick, sickening red line of outgoing wire transfers painted a terrifying picture. Over the course of 36 months, exactly $5 million had been siphoned out of the orphanage fund. I clicked on the receiving account. It belonged to an offshore holding company registered in the Cayman Islands. The sole proprietors of that company were Preston and Serena. My sister had not just turned a blind eye to her husband failing business. She was an active, willing accomplice. While she was posting tearful videos on Instagram asking for prayers and painting me as a villain, she was financing her designer wardrobe, her luxury vehicles, and her mansion by literally stealing from orphans. But a transfer of that size out of a highly monitored church account could not happen without executive clearance. The church board of directors required dual signatures for any withdrawal over $10,000. I pulled up the digitized authorization forms attached to the outgoing wires. There it was. Beatrice's signature, bold and proud, stamped on every single transaction. My mother had bypassed the board of directors by categorizing the $5 million as a charitable real estate development investment. She had fabricated a narrative that the church was partnering with Preston elite firm to build affordable housing for low-income families. It was a complete lie. Not a single brick was ever laid. Beatrice had deliberately systematically robbed the most vulnerable people in our community just to ensure her golden child could continue parading around high society as a wealthy housewife. The hypocrisy was suffocating. Beatrice stood on a holy altar praying for my wicked soul while her own hands were stained with the theft of $5 million from parentless children. She had sold her soul, her congregation, and her integrity just to maintain the illusion of white proximity and elite status. An alert suddenly flared on my secondary monitor, blinking in urgent amber. It was an automated ping from a federal tracking database that Onyx Capital monitored for risk assessment on our corporate targets. I opened the file. Preston was not just broke, he was a hunted man. The document was a sealed subpoena from the Internal Revenue Service operating in conjunction with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The feds had frozen a secondary shell account linked to the orphanage theft 3 days ago. They were actively executing a covert investigation into wire fraud, tax evasion, and grand larceny. I read through the federal timeline. Preston and Serena had been issued a final warning under the guise of an internal church audit. A whistleblower within the church accounting department had noticed the discrepancies and filed a report to the federal authorities. The feds were giving Preston exactly 7 days to produce the missing $5 million or prove the affordable housing development existed. If the capital was not replaced by next Friday, the federal indictment would be unsealed. Next Friday, the exact date of the church annual charity gala. The biggest, most glamorous event of the year, where Beatrice and Serena were scheduled to accept an award for their philanthropic excellence. Everything suddenly clicked into place with terrifying clarity. That was why they called me. That was why they were begging for $300,000. It was never about a minor cash flow issue. It was a desperate, panicked attempt to pay off the whistleblower or hire a high-powered criminal defense attorney before the federal hammer dropped. They thought they could manipulate the discarded, estranged daughter into financing their legal defense or worse, trick me into signing documents that would tie my clean, successful name to their toxic criminal accounts. They wanted me to be the fall guy. They wanted my signature on their burning ship so that when the FBI kicked the doors down, the black daughter with the dropout record and the supposed mental health issues would be the one holding the bag. I leaned back in my leather chair, a dark, chilling smile spreading across my face. They had exactly 7 days left as free citizens. 7 days before the illusion shattered, and they were exposed as the most despicable frauds in Atlanta. I was not going to stop the FBI. I was going to roll out the red carpet for them. I picked up my phone and sent a secure message to my legal team. Prepare the acquisition papers for all of Preston commercial debt immediately. We finalize the purchase by Wednesday. I want absolute legal authority to seize their home, their cars, and their assets the second they default. My mother had promised me 12 years ago that I would be back begging on my knees. She was off by a decade, and she had the roles entirely reversed. By next Friday night, the entire city of Atlanta would watch them beg, and I was going to make sure they had absolutely nowhere to run. Tuesday morning in New York brought a crisp, biting wind that matched my mood perfectly. I walked into the soaring marble lobby of the Onyx Capitol building on Wall Street, flanked by the morning rush of executives and analysts. I wore a sharp emerald green pantsuit, my locks styled meticulously into an elegant updo. I was reviewing a digital brief on my phone, preparing for a final meeting with my legal team to finalize the purchase of Preston toxic debt, when a heavy hand grabbed my elbow, yanking me to a sudden halt. I spun around my security detail, instantly stepping forward from the periphery, but I raised a single finger to halt them. Standing there, sweating profusely despite the climate-controlled air of the lobby, was Preston. His usually perfect blonde hair was disheveled and his expensive suit looked like he had slept in it. The desperation rolling off him was pungent, mixing with the smell of stale scotch and fear. He had tracked me down to New York. He looked around the towering, opulent lobby, his eyes darting across the security guards and the polished brass elevators, before looking back down at me with a sneer of pure, unfiltered disdain. He clearly assumed I was just a mid-level clerk clocking in for a shift at one of the dozens of financial firms housed in the skyscraper. He had no idea my company owned the entire top 3 floors. "You are a very hard woman to track down." Preston hissed, his grip tightening on his leather briefcase. "I had to hire a private investigator just to find out which building you worked in. Do you have any idea how much time you are wasting?" I stepped back, smoothing the fabric of my sleeve where he had grabbed me. I gave him a look of absolute zero. "You have exactly 10 seconds to state your business before I have security throw you out onto the pavement." Preston laughed, a harsh, grating sound that drew annoyed glances from passing investment bankers. "Security. You think the corporate guards in this building care about a diversity hire with a bad attitude? Listen to me very closely, Kiara. I am done playing games with you. You owe your betters, and it is time you paid your dues." He stepped closer, dropping his voice to a venomous whisper, letting his true colors show entirely. "I gave your sister a life you could only dream of. I elevated your mother's social standing just by associating with her. And you walk around with your nappy hair and your arrogant posture acting like you are above us. You people always want a handout without putting in the work. Well, the free ride is over. You are going to do exactly what I tell you to do, or you are going to federal prison." I did not blink. Federal prison. Are you drunk, Preston, or just hallucinating? He unclasped his briefcase right there in the middle of the lobby, pulling out a manila folder. He shoved it against my chest, forcing me to take it. "Open it," he commanded, a manic gleam in his bloodshot eyes. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of commercial loan applications, and corporate registration documents for a series of shell companies dating back nearly 7 years. I recognized the names immediately. They were the earliest phantom entities used to establish his Ponzi scheme. But what caught my eye was the signature line at the bottom of each page. My name was signed in a messy forged script. Right below it was my old social security number, the one I had before I legally secured a new identity to escape my mother financial abuse. I looked up at him, keeping my face perfectly neutral, though my mind was racing. "You forged my signature." "I did not forge anything," Preston said, flashing a sickening, triumphant smile. "Your mother generously provided your personal information years ago when I needed a clean, unrelated name to act as a silent guarantor for some high-risk ventures. You were technically an adult living off the grid, entirely unaccountable. You made the perfect ghost partner. And now those specific shell companies are the ones currently under investigation by the Internal Revenue Service." The sheer depravity of it was staggering. Beatrice had handed over my personal identification to her white son-in-law so he could commit corporate fraud fully, knowing it could ruin my life. They had planned to use me as their ultimate safety net from the very beginning. If the scheme collapsed, the paper trail would lead the federal agents directly to the estranged, unstable black daughter who had vanished from Atlanta. "You see," Kiara Preston sneered, leaning in so close I could smell the alcohol on his breath. "You are already in this up to your neck. The feds are looking at these specific accounts. If I go down next week, I am handing them these files. I will tell them you were the mastermind behind the fraudulent loans. Who do you think a judge will believe? A respected, wealthy white real estate developer, or a bitter college dropout who cannot even hold down a relationship with her own mother?" I let my hands tremble slightly. It was a calculated physical reaction, a performance designed to feed his massive ego. I widened my eyes, projecting exactly the kind of panic he desperately needed to see. "You are framing me," I whispered, letting my voice crack just a fraction. "You cannot do this. I have a life here. I have a job. You will ruin everything I have built." Preston drank in my fake terror like a man dying of thirst. He straightened his jacket, looking incredibly satisfied with himself. "I do not want to ruin you, Kiara," he said, his tone shifting to a mocking imitation of sympathy. "I am a reasonable man. I am giving you a choice. You come back to Atlanta this weekend. You sign a sworn affidavit taking full responsibility for the Genesis Orphanage Fund discrepancies, claiming you hacked the accounts to frame me. If you confess to the cybercrimes, I will make the other loan documents disappear. You do 5 years in a minimum security facility, and when you get out, Beatrice and I will make sure you are financially comfortable for the rest of your life." He tapped his watch. "You have until Friday. Bring yourself to the church charity gala. We have a VIP room booked. Sign the confession in front of my lawyers, and we have a deal. If you try to run, or if you call the police, I leak the forged documents to the FBI immediately. Do not test me, Kiara. You have no power here." He gave me one last disgusted look, turned on his heel, and walked out through the revolving glass doors. I stood in the lobby holding the manila folder. My security detail stepped up beside me, asking if I needed them to intercept him. I raised my hand to stop them. "No," I said, a slow, predatory smile replacing my fake panic. "Let him go." He just handed me the final nail for his own coffin. I walked to the private elevator, my mind already executing the next phase of the war. My private phone vibrated before the elevator doors could even slide shut. An unsaved number flashed on the screen with a video call request. I tapped accept, expecting Elias to deliver an urgent update on the debt acquisition. Instead, the high-definition screen filled with the plush beige leather interior of a luxury sport utility vehicle. Preston was sitting in the front passenger seat, an arrogant smirk plastered across his face as he held the camera high. He had not just come to New York alone. He had brought the entire circus with him. Sitting in the back seat were Beatrice and Serena. They looked like they were dressed for a high society funeral, wearing dark designer coats and oversized sunglasses. "I forgot to mention one tiny detail before I left your lobby," Kiara Preston said, his voice dripping with venomous glee. "I brought the family along for the trip. They wanted to make sure you understood exactly what is at stake. We are parked right across the street, watching your beautiful building. Preston passed the phone back to the rear seats. The camera shook slightly before settling on my mother's face. Beatrice removed her sunglasses, her eyes hard and entirely devoid of any maternal warmth. Beside her, Serena was already deploying her signature crocodile tears, dabbing at her dry eyes with a monogrammed tissue. "Kiara, you have to do this for me," Serena cried out, her voice pitching into a theatrical whine. "You owe me this. You ruined my life when you got kicked out of the house, and now you are trying to ruin my marriage. Preston is a good man. He provides for me. If he goes to prison, I will be a social outcast. My friends in the charity leagues will abandon me. You cannot let them take my husband away. You have to save us." I stared at the screen, letting the silence stretch. I wanted them to reveal the absolute bottom of their depravity. Beatrice leaned closer to the camera, shoving Serena slightly out of the frame. Her face was a mask of cold, calculating piety. She was about to deliver the most horrific demand a mother could possibly make of her own child. "Listen to me, Kiara," Beatrice commanded, her tone dropping into the authoritative cadence she used to lecture her congregation. "You have always been a difficult, ungrateful girl. But the Lord works in mysterious ways, and He is giving you a chance to finally serve a true purpose for this family. We have discussed this with Preston lawyers, and it is the only logical solution." She paused, making sure every single word would cut as deeply as possible. "You are just a single black woman with no husband, no children, and no social status to speak of," Beatrice stated smoothly. "You have absolutely nothing to lose. A few years in a minimum security white-collar prison will not ruin you. You can read books, find God, maybe even take some classes. But Preston is a respected white businessman. He is the provider for your sister. A federal scandal would completely destroy him. The media would tear him apart, and it would ruin Serena standing in Atlanta. You cannot be selfish enough to let that happen. Take the fall for your sister." The sheer unfiltered racism and misogynoir coming from my own mother was a masterclass in self-hatred. She was willing to sacrifice her own flesh and blood, her own black daughter, to the federal prison system simply to protect the counterfeit prestige of a mediocre white man. She viewed my life as entirely disposable because I did not cater to the patriarchal, white-adjacent respectability politics she worshipped. It was deeply sickening, yet brilliantly useful for my current strategy. I needed them to believe they had broken me. I needed them to walk into my trap with absolute blind confidence. I forced my breathing to become shallow and erratic. I bit the inside of my cheek until a genuine wave of physical discomfort washed over my face, allowing a single tear to spill over my eyelashes. "Mom, how can you ask me to do this?" I whispered, making my voice tremble with perfectly manufactured heartbreak. "How can you ask me to throw my life away and go to federal prison for a crime I did not commit? How could you hate me this much?" Beatrice's expression did not soften for a single second. "It is your duty," she replied coldly. "You are going to take the fall for your sister Kiara. You will sign the confession at the charity gala this Friday. We have a discreet lawyer who will process everything with the authorities. If you do this, I will personally forgive you for everything you put this family through. If you refuse, Preston will hand over those forged loan documents, and you will go to a much worse prison for a much longer time. The choice is yours." I let my shoulders slump forward, projecting total defeat. "Okay," I sobbed, covering my mouth with my hand. "Okay, I will do it. Just please do not let him send those documents to the FBI. I will be at the gala on Friday. I will sign whatever you want. Just leave me alone until then." Serena smiled, her fake tears instantly vanishing. "I knew you would do the right thing for once in your life," she said cheerfully. "Wear something appropriate on Friday. We do not want you embarrassing us before the lawyers take you away." The video call disconnected abruptly. The moment the screen went black, my tears stopped. My posture instantly corrected, my spine snapping straight. I wiped the single drop of moisture from my cheek and smiled. The elevator chimed softly, the doors sliding open to reveal the sprawling glass-walled expanse of my penthouse office. Elias was waiting by my desk holding a secure tablet. He took one look at my face and knew exactly what had just happened. "Did you get it?" I asked, tossing my phone onto the desk. Elias tapped the tablet. Every single word. Your phone's security software automatically recorded the entire video call. We now have Beatrice and Serena on tape actively conspiring to extort you, committing witness tampering and aiding in federal financial fraud. It is a masterpiece of criminal evidence. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the street far below. I could see a tiny black SUV pulling away from the curb, carrying the three people who thought they had just secured their salvation. They thought they had successfully cornered a frightened, isolated woman. They had no idea they had just handed me the very rope I was going to use to hang them. "The paperwork for the debt acquisition is ready for your signature," Elias said, placing a thick leather binder on my desk. "By tomorrow morning, Onyx Capital will legally own every single cent Preston owes to his creditors." I turned away from the window and picked up my fountain pen. "I am going to sign this," I said, my voice ringing with absolute certainty. "And then I am going to pick out a dress for Friday night. If my family wants a spectacular show at the charity gala, I am going to give them a performance they will never, ever forget." I pressed my fountain pen against the heavy parchment, my signature flowing in sharp, definitive strokes. With that single motion, Onyx Capital became the sole owner of Preston's suffocating financial liabilities. I closed the binder and handed it to Elias. The trap was armed. But a trap is useless unless the prey steps directly onto the trigger. My desk phone chimed. It was an encrypted conference call request. Preston and his legal counsel. They wanted to nail down the specifics before Friday. I cleared my throat, dropped my shoulders, and instantly reverted back to the frightened, defeated woman they desperately needed me to be. I answered the call, making sure my voice trembled just enough to sound completely broken. "Hello," I whispered, sniffing softly into the receiver. Kiara Preston barked, his voice echoing through the speakerphone with unbearable smugness. "I have my attorney on the line. We are finalizing the paperwork you will be signing on Friday. Listen closely because I will not repeat myself." The lawyer's voice came through slick and devoid of any humanity. He outlined the confession. I was to admit to bypassing the church security firewalls, routing the $5 million into offshore accounts, and framing Preston. But then the lawyer added a new stipulation, one that showcased the absolute bottomless pit of their greed. Furthermore, the lawyer stated smoothly, as part of the restitution agreement to the church, you will sign over the deed to your personal residence and transfer all liquid assets in your savings accounts to a holding trust managed by Preston. This will demonstrate your remorse to the federal authorities and might shave a few months off your inevitable prison sentence. They did not just want me to take the fall for their crimes. They wanted to strip me of every single penny I owned. They assumed my apartment and savings amounted to a few $100,000, just enough to float Preston a little longer while the heat died down. "Please," I sobbed, gripping the edge of my desk and forcing panic into my voice. "You cannot take everything. I worked so hard for my apartment. I will sign the confession. I will go to prison for you. But please leave me my home. What am I supposed to do when I get out? I will have nothing. You should have thought about that before you became such a disappointment to this family." Beatrice's voice suddenly cut through the line. She had been listening quietly on mute, basking in my manufactured misery. "Poverty builds character, Kiara. Maybe losing your worldly possessions will finally teach you some humility. The Lord strips us down to build us back up." "It is not fair," I cried out, making sure my breathing sounded ragged and desperate. "Serena gets to keep her mansion and her designer clothes, and I have to lose everything." Serena chimed in, her tone dripping with malicious entitlement. "I earned my life, Kiara. Preston provides for me because I am a supportive, loving wife. You brought this on yourself by being so bitter and alone. Honestly, using your little savings to help us recover from the stress you have caused is the least you can do. Consider it your final contribution to the family." The arrogance radiating from the speakerphone was intoxicating. They were gorging themselves on my fake submission, entirely blinded by their own narcissism. Preston took over the call, his ego swelling to massive proportions. He was speaking to me not just as a disgraced family member, but as a conquered enemy. Here are your strict instructions for Friday, Preston commanded. The church annual charity gala is the biggest social event of the season. The mayor will be there. The governor will be there. The most influential Black families in Atlanta are attending, and you are not to embarrass us. You will arrive at exactly 8 o'clock. You will use the service elevator at the back of the venue so nobody important sees you. You will proceed directly to the private VIP lounge on the mezzanine level. Can I just sign the papers now and send them? I begged, letting out a pathetic whimper. I do not want to be at the gala. Please do not make me do this in person. I cannot face everyone knowing what is about to happen to me. You will do exactly as you are told. Preston snapped, his voice sharp like a whip. We need to ensure the signatures are witnessed in person by my legal team, so you cannot back out at the last second. You will sit in that VIP lounge quietly. After your mother delivers her keynote charity address, and Serena and I accept our philanthropic award, we will come upstairs. You will sign the confession. You will sign over your assets, and then we will hand you over to the authorities waiting at the service exit. Okay, I whispered, my voice incredibly small, matching the persona of the broken victim perfectly. I will be there, I promise. Just please do not let them hurt me in prison. See you Friday, you pathetic loser, Preston sneered. The call disconnected with a sharp click. I lowered the phone from my ear. The trembling in my hands vanished instantly. My posture straightened, and the fake tears dried on my cheeks. I looked across my sprawling office at Elias, who was standing by the door with his arms crossed, a look of pure astonishment on his face. They really have no idea who they are dealing with, Elias said, shaking his head. They think they are dealing with a scared little girl, I replied, my voice dropping back to its natural commanding pitch. They want me to use the service elevator. They want me to hide in the shadows while they accept awards for philanthropy paid for by stolen orphanage funds. I walked over to the massive mahogany closet in my office and pulled open the double doors. Inside hung a garment bag containing a custom-designed floor-length gown made of crushed black velvet and woven gold thread. It was a dress designed for a queen, a dress designed to stop traffic and command absolute authority. Elias, I said, running my hand along the expensive fabric. Call the security firm. I need 10 former federal agents in full tactical formal wear. We are not using the service elevator on Friday. We are walking right through the front doors, and we are going to burn their entire kingdom to the ground. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in financial warfare. While my mother and sister were busy picking out designer jewelry for their grand gala appearance, I transformed the top floor of the Onyx Capitol building into a high-speed command center. I did not shed another tear. I did not waste another second on anger. Anger is an undisciplined emotion. I prefer absolute surgical precision. Elias and my lead corporate attorneys gathered around the massive glass table in my boardroom at dawn on Wednesday. The digital monitors displayed a web of Preston's financial liabilities, a sprawling mess of defaulted loans, over-leveraged mortgages, and furious private investors. Preston thought he was a clever businessman, but his books were a disaster of arrogant negligence. He had borrowed against everything he touched. His luxury cars, his commercial office space, even the marble columns in Serena's mansion were leveraged to the absolute limit. I pointed to the largest red block on the monitor. This was the primary commercial mortgage on Preston's development firm held by a prominent investment bank in Manhattan. The bank knew Preston was drowning. They were preparing to write off the bad debt and initiate a messy public foreclosure. They wanted a clean exit, and I was going to give them one. My chief financial officer made the call. He did not introduce me by name, only stating that a private equity firm was willing to purchase the distressed debt immediately for cash. The bankers on the other end of the line practically wept with relief. Within 2 hours, the digital contracts were drafted, verified, and sent to my desk. I signed the transfer authorization with a few swift strokes of my pen. With that single signature, the bank stepped aside. I now personally held the commercial mortgage on Preston's entire operation. But that was just the beginning. I wanted to own every single aspect of his miserable existence. We moved down the list to the secondary lenders. These were the predatory, high-interest lenders Preston had turned to when the traditional banks cut him off. They held the paper on his fleet of leased Mercedes-Benz vehicles and the sprawling suburban mansion where Serena spent her days taking selfies. These lenders were aggressive and impatient. Elias handled the negotiations. He offered them 80 cents on the dollar to buy out the debt immediately, cash in hand by the end of the business day. Greed is a predictable motivator. By Wednesday afternoon, those lenders gladly signed over their rights. I authorized the wire transfers from Onyx Capital's reserve funds. I was spending millions, but to me it was not an expense. It was an investment in pure, unadulterated justice. I now held the deed to my sister's house and the titles to her husband's cars. The final pieces of the puzzle were the private investors, the wealthy, trusting members of Beatrice's megachurch who had handed their retirement savings over to Preston based on my mother's holy endorsement. These people were beginning to ask questions. They wanted their quarterly dividends, and Preston had been dodging their calls for weeks. They were scared, angry, and on the verge of going to the authorities. I had my legal team reach out to them quietly, offering a full buyout of their original investment principal in exchange for transferring their promissory notes to Onyx Capital. They were shocked and overwhelmingly relieved to get their money back. They signed the non-disclosure agreements and transferred their claims. By making them whole, I removed the messy, unpredictable element of public outrage from the equation, concentrating all the leverage directly into my own hands. By Thursday evening, the command center fell quiet. The monitors, previously glowing with red liabilities, were now solid green, indicating fully acquired assets. Elias placed a thick black leather folder on my desk. It was heavy. It contained the consolidated legal documentation of everything we had accomplished over the past 48 hours. "We have it all," Kiara Elias said, his voice carrying a note of deep respect. 100% of his commercial liabilities. The mortgages, the auto leases, the private investor notes, and the outstanding corporate credit lines. It is entirely consolidated under Onyx Capital. I opened the folder, running my fingers over the crisp legal documents. Preston thought he owed money to faceless banks in New York and easily manipulated church members in Atlanta. He thought his debt was scattered, giving him room to breathe, to negotiate, to run his pathetic shell games. He was wrong. He owed me. I literally owned his life. I owned the roof over his head. I owned the leather seats in the car he drove. I owned the very desk he sat at while pretending to be a master of the universe. If he failed to make a payment, I did not have to send a collection agency. I had the legal authority to seize everything he possessed with a single phone call. I looked out the window at the setting sun, imagining Preston hundreds of miles away in Atlanta. He was probably standing in front of a mirror right now, trying on his custom tuxedo for the charity gala, polishing his expensive watch, bragging to Serena about how he had successfully bullied his estranged sister into taking the fall for his crimes. He believed he was the apex predator. He believed he had outsmarted the federal government, his investors, and his family. He had no idea that he was a dead man walking. He had no idea that the moment he walked into that VIP room on Friday night, he would be stepping onto property I could legally rip out from under him. The victim they had created at 17 was gone. The woman they were about to face held the absolute power to erase them from the map, and I was going to use every single ounce of it. The restaurant scene was exactly the confirmation I needed, but Friday morning broke with the kind of sharp, crystal-clear skies that precede a major storm. I stood at the head of my conference table looking at the dozen people assembled before me. This was my inner circle. My elite legal counsel, my cybersecurity experts, and my tactical protection detail. When my biological mother threw me out into the rain, I had nothing. Over the past 12 years, I had handpicked these individuals, not just for their brilliance, but for their loyalty. They were my chosen family, and they were ready to go to war for me. Marcus, my lead corporate litigator, slid a stack of heavy red-bordered folders down the length of the glass table. "The seizure documents are fully executed," he announced, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man who destroys monopolies for a living. The moment Preston defaults on his agreement, which he mathematically must do by tonight, We have the legal standing to freeze every single liquid asset he possesses. The foreclosure notices for the suburban mansion and the commercial office space are drafted, signed, and ready for immediate service. The local authorities in Atlanta have been quietly briefed on the impending federal action to ensure our asset recovery does not face jurisdictional delays. I nodded, placing my hands flat on the table. Excellent. Elias, what is our tactical position at the venue? Elias stepped up to the digital monitor, bringing up a three-dimensional blueprint of the Atlanta mega church and its adjoining luxury banquet hall. The annual charity gala was being held in the grand atrium. He zoomed in on a small, isolated room on the mezzanine level. The VIP lounge, Elias stated, tapping the screen. Preston chose it because it has no windows and limited access, assuming it gives him absolute control. He is a fool. My advance team breached the room at 3 o'clock this morning under the guise of an audio-visual maintenance crew. We have installed 4 high-definition micro-cameras embedded in the crown molding. We also planted military-grade audio transmitters under the central conference table and behind the leather seating. Every breath they take in that room will be recorded, encrypted, and beamed directly to our mobile command unit outside. I looked at the blueprint, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction. Preston thought he was leading a sheep to the slaughterhouse. He had no idea he was walking into a panopticon designed exclusively for his destruction. Before we review the extraction protocol, Elias continued, his tone suddenly shifting, dropping its usual clinical detachment. I have something else, something we acquired late last night. He pulled a small silver flash drive from his pocket. My analysts were digging into Preston former staff, looking for any disgruntled executives who might have retained internal communications. We tracked down a young black woman who served as his executive assistant 2 years ago. Preston fired her without cause just before the bankruptcy, refusing to pay her severance. She kept a backup of his dictaphone recordings as an insurance policy. She handed it over to us gladly. Elias plugged the drive into the main console. You need to hear this, Kiara. It is raw, but it is exactly what you need. He hit play. A burst of static filled the room, followed by the unmistakable arrogant drawl of my brother-in-law. The recording sounded like he had accidentally left his device running after a phone call, muttering to himself in the privacy of his office while pouring a drink. God, I cannot stand these people! Preston's voice echoed off the boardroom walls, his tone thick with disgust. These ignorant church people practically hand me their money just because Beatrice vouches for me. They are so desperate for a white savior in a tailored suit to validate their little country club aspirations. It is pathetic. The room went dead silent. My legal team stared at the speakers, their expressions hardening. And Serena Preston's voice continued, letting out a sharp, cruel laugh. Beatrice thinks I married her daughter out of love. Serena is just a dumb, expensive prop. A diversity mascot I parade around to make these wealthy black investors feel comfortable handing over their retirement funds. She spends my money like a child playing dress-up, but as long as she keeps smiling and playing the obedient little housewife, she serves her purpose. They all do. The recording clicked off, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence in its wake. I stood completely motionless, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. Hearing the unfiltered vile racism and misogynoir spill from his mouth confirmed every single instinct I ever had about him. He despised my sister. He despised my mother. He viewed the entire congregation as subhuman marks meant to be financially slaughtered for his benefit. Beatrice had thrown me away, sacrificing her own flesh and blood to protect a man who viewed her as nothing more than a useful, ignorant pawn. Marcus looked at me, his eyes filled with cold determination. We can submit this to the federal prosecutors, Kiara. It establishes clear, malicious intent regarding the affinity fraud. We will submit it to the feds, I replied, my voice dangerously soft. But first we are going to play it for an audience. I want this audio file loaded onto a secure server. I want it rigged to a remote trigger on my phone. Elias raised an eyebrow. You want to play it in the VIP room? I looked at Elias, a dark, terrible promise burning in my chest. I want to play it in the VIP room for Beatrice and Serena to hear. And then I want to override the audio-visual system in the main ballroom and broadcast it to the entire gala. If Preston wants to use my people as props, my people are going to hear exactly what the puppet master thinks of them. I turned to my team feeling the absolute weight of the moment. The abused, discarded teenager was a ghost. The woman standing here was a heavily armed corporate executioner. Load the jets, I commanded, grabbing my briefcase. We are going to Atlanta. It is time to go to church. The grand atrium of the Atlanta megachurch banquet hall was completely transformed. It was a masterclass in performative wealth. Red carpets spilled down the marble steps, flanked by towering floral arrangements of white orchids and gold-accented foliage. Flashbulbs popped as local politicians, real estate tycoons, and the upper echelon of the Atlanta elite arrived. Waiters in crisp white jackets circulated with trays of imported champagne. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the suffocating weight of respectability politics. At the center of it all stood Beatrice and Serena holding court like absolute royalty. Beatrice wore a shimmering silver gown that reflected the light of the crystal chandeliers, her smile practiced and flawless as she greeted wealthy donors. She grasped their hands, offering pious blessings, while subtly reminding them of the church's historic commitment to charity. Beside her, Serena was a walking billboard for stolen luxury. She wore a diamond necklace that likely cost more than a college tuition, laughing loudly at jokes made by city councilmen and investors. Preston played his role with sickening ease. He stood by the main ice sculpture holding a glass of bourbon, shaking hands with black doctors and lawyers. He projected the image of the benevolent white savior speaking passionately about his fake affordable housing development and how proud he was to partner with the church. They were entirely in their element, gorging themselves on the adoration of the very people they were currently robbing blind. Outside the venue, a fleet of 3 black armored SUVs pulled up to the curb. The valet staff rushed forward, but my tactical team was already out. Elias and Marcus stepped onto the pavement, their earpieces discreetly tucked away, their tailored tuxedos fitting seamlessly into the high society crowd. Elias opened my door. I stepped out into the humid Atlanta night. I did not use the service elevator. I did not hide in the shadows. I walked straight up the red carpet. I wore a custom-designed floor-length gown made of midnight black silk that pooled around my heels like liquid obsidian. A structured cape draped over my shoulders, lined with a subtle shimmering gold thread that caught the flash of the cameras. My natural locks were pinned into a towering regal crown interwoven with delicate gold wire. I wore no necklace, no flashy diamonds, just the absolute terrifying aura of a woman who held the executioner blade. The murmur in the grand lobby started near the doors and rippled inward like a tidal wave. Conversations halted, heads turned. The Atlanta elite people who had only ever heard Beatrice whisper about her troubled, estranged daughter stared in absolute awe. I moved through the crowd with the slow, predatory grace of a panther flanked by Elias and Marcus. The crowd instinctively parted for us, recognizing power even if they did not know my name. Across the room, Beatrice's smile froze. Her hand tightened around her champagne flute so hard I thought the crystal might shatter. Serena's jaw actually dropped, her eyes scanning my custom gown with a mixture of raw jealousy and absolute confusion. Preston stopped mid-sentence, his arrogant smirk faltering as he watched my security detail smoothly redirect a waiter out of my path. They broke away from their wealthy audience and intercepted me near the grand staircase. They moved quickly, desperate to contain the situation before I could interact with anyone important. "What on earth are you doing coming through the front doors?" Beatrice hissed. Her voice dropped to a frantic whisper while maintaining a rigid plastic smile for the onlookers. "I told you to use the service entrance." I looked down at her. "You told me to arrive at 8 o'clock. It is exactly 8 o'clock. I thought I would save the valet some trouble." Serena stepped closer, her eyes raking over my dress, searching for a flaw. "Look at you," she scoffed, crossing her arms. "Renting a couture gown for your final night of freedom. Did you max out your last little credit card just to pretend you belong here?" "It is pathetic, Kiara." dressing up like royalty when you are about to sign your life away to a federal prison. Enjoy the dress while you can. You will be wearing an orange jumpsuit by tomorrow morning. Preston leaned in, blocking me from the view of the nearby mayor. You have got a lot of nerve pulling a stunt like this, he growled, his face flushing red under the chandelier lights. Bringing hired muscle, renting an outfit. You think playing dress-up changes anything? The lawyers are waiting upstairs. Do not make me drag you up there myself. I let them pour their venom over me. I absorbed their insults, their condescension, and their sheer monumental delusion. They were so blinded by their own superiority that they could not see the trap closing around them. They truly believed I was a broken woman trying to salvage one last shred of dignity before surrendering to their demands. I smiled, a soft, chilling expression that made Preston blink in confusion. You requested my presence, Preston. I am simply rising to the occasion. Shall we go meet your legal team? I am very eager to get this paperwork signed. Beatrice grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into my skin. Good. Let us get this over with before you embarrass this family any further. She released my arm and turned toward the grand staircase leading the way to the mezzanine level. Serena and Preston followed, throwing disgusted glances over their shoulders at me. I fell into step behind them, Elias and Marcus, shadowing my every move. The music swelled in the ballroom below, a joyful, elegant symphony playing for a room full of people who were about to witness a massacre. I walked up the marble steps, completely ready to deliver the final judgment. The heavy mahogany doors of the VIP lounge clicked shut, sealing us inside a soundproof chamber of quiet, insulated wealth. The roar of the charity gala below vanished instantly, replaced by the hushed hum of the climate control system and the faint ticking of a gold grandfather clock in the corner. The room was designed for backroom deals and discreet handshakes, furnished with dark leather armchairs, a fully stocked wet bar, and a massive oak conference table occupying the center. Seated at the head of that table was Preston's attorney, a man whose expensive gray suit and slicked-back hair radiated the kind of ruthless legal authority money could buy. He did not stand when we entered. He merely gestured to the leather chair opposite him, a stack of freshly printed legal documents resting perfectly squared on the polished wood. Beatrice moved immediately to the head of the table, standing behind the lawyer like a watchful warden. Serena took her place beside Preston, her arms crossed over her chest, tapping her manicured nails against her bare arm in a display of aggressive impatience. Elias and Marcus stepped into the room right behind me, positioning themselves seamlessly by the exit. Preston glanced at them, a flash of annoyance crossing his face, but he quickly dismissed their presence. He assumed they were just rented muscle paid to stand around and look intimidating, while the real adults handled the business. Sit down, Kiara, Preston commanded, pulling out the heavy leather chair for me with a mocking sweep of his hand. We have wasted enough time on your grand entrance. Let us get down to reality. I walked slowly to the table, my black silk gown gliding silently across the thick Persian rug. I took the seat, keeping my posture perfectly straight, my hands resting lightly on my lap. The lawyer slid the stack of papers across the oak surface until it rested directly in front of me. This is the sworn confession, the lawyer stated, his voice flat and mechanical. It details your unauthorized access to the church financial systems, your transfer of the $5 million into offshore accounts, and your deliberate attempt to frame my client. Beneath that is the asset forfeiture agreement. You are signing over the deed to your apartment and granting total control of your bank accounts to the holding trust managed by Preston. We need your signature on every page marked with a yellow flag. Beatrice leaned over the table, her eyes glittering with a toxic mixture of triumph and absolute cruelty. Do not read it, Kiara, my mother instructed coldly. Just sign it. The federal agents are waiting at the loading dock downstairs. If you do this quietly without causing a scene, I will make sure the church prays for your soul while you serve your sentence. It is the Christian thing to do. You owe this family your sacrifice. Serena let out a sharp, derisive laugh. Exactly. You have contributed absolutely nothing to our legacy since you dropped out of college. Signing those papers is the only valuable thing you will ever do for the Blackwell name. Just put pen to paper so Preston can go back downstairs and accept his philanthropy award. We have photographers waiting. Preston walked around the table, coming to stand directly behind my chair. He leaned down, placing his heavy hands on the backrest, his breath hot against my neck. "I told you what would happen if you tried to fight me," he whispered, his voice dripping with venomous satisfaction. "You thought you could walk away from us 12 years ago and build some pathetic little life on your own. You thought you could escape your place. But look at you now. You are right back where you belong, begging for mercy, trapped in a room, about to hand over everything you have to save your betters." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a heavy gold-plated fountain pen. He tossed it onto the documents in front of me. The metal clattered loudly against the wood. "Sign the confession," Preston sneered, stepping back to admire his own handiwork. "Sign away your cheap apartment. Sign away your savings. Sign away your freedom. And maybe if you are a good girl and keep your mouth shut during the trial, I will put a few dollars in your commissary account so you can buy yourself some decent shampoo in prison." The sheer magnitude of their arrogance was a physical presence in the room. They had built an entire alternate reality where they were untouchable gods, and I was nothing more than a sacrificial lamb led to the altar of their vanity. They did not notice the way Elias subtly adjusted his stance by the door. They did not notice Marcus casually slipping his hand into his tailored jacket. They were too intoxicated by the illusion of their own supreme power. I looked down at the documents. I read the bold capitalized words of the fake confession. I looked at the line where my name was printed, waiting for my signature to validate their monstrous lies. I slowly reached out and picked up the gold-plated fountain pen. It was heavy, ostentatious, and entirely fake, just like the man who owned it. I held the pen in my right hand. I hovered the gold nib exactly 1 inch above the signature line. Preston let out a long, satisfied exhale, thinking he had won. Beatrice smiled, finally dropping her tense posture. Serena pulled out her phone, likely preparing to text her friends that the annoying family problem had been permanently handled. I kept the pen hovering over the paper. Then I wrapped my fingers tightly around the thick barrel. With one sudden violent and incredibly deliberate motion, I snapped the gold pen completely in half. The thick plastic inner casing cracked with a loud, sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot in the soundproof room. Dark blue ink exploded from the ruptured cartridge, splattering across the pristine white pages of the confession, pooling over the signature line and splashing onto the polished oak table. The silence that followed was absolute. "What the hell are you doing?" Preston yelled, his face instantly turning a mottled, furious purple. He lunged forward, reaching for the ruined documents. I dropped the broken pieces of the pen onto the ink-soaked paper. I did not raise my voice. I did not flinch. I simply turned my head slightly toward the heavy mahogany doors and gave a single sharp nod. Elias and Marcus moved with terrifying speed. In perfect synchronization, they stepped away from the exit and locked the deadbolts. The trap was officially sprung, and nobody was leaving this room until I was completely finished with them. Preston slammed his hands on the table, leaning over the ruined ink-soaked documents. "Unlock those doors right now!" he bellowed, his face turning a deep, dangerous shade of crimson. "You think locking us in here changes anything? The federal agents are outside. You are going to prison." I did not even look at him. My eyes were fixed entirely on his attorney. The man in the expensive gray suit had stopped breathing. He was staring at Marcus, recognizing the posture and the custom-tailored suit of a man who did not work security, but high-stakes corporate litigation. I reached into the hidden pocket of my silk gown and withdrew a single matte black business card. It had no flashy gold trim, no embossed logos, just stark white minimalist text. I placed 2 fingers on the edge of the card and slid it across the polished oak table, steering it perfectly through the puddles of blue ink until it stopped directly in front of the lawyer. "Read it," I commanded, my voice slicing through Preston's continued shouting. The lawyer hesitantly reached out. His fingers were actually trembling as he picked up the card. He adjusted his glasses, his eyes scanning the brief text. I watched the exact second his reality shattered. All the color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a freshly exhumed corpse. He swallowed hard, his chest heaving erratically. "What is it?" Preston snapped, snatching the card from the lawyer's shaking hand. What kind of stupid game is this? Preston looked at the card. He read the words aloud, his voice dripping with venomous disbelief. Kiara, Chief Executive Officer, Onyx Capital. He threw the card back onto the table and let out a loud, mocking laugh. Onyx Capital. You expect me to believe you run Onyx Capital? That is a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm in New York. You are a college dropout. You probably printed these at a local copy shop to scare us. The lawyer did not laugh. He grabbed Preston by the sleeve of his custom blazer, yanking him downward. Preston, shut up. The lawyer hissed, his voice dropping to a frantic, terrified whisper. Shut your mouth right now. Get off me, Preston growled, ripping his arm away. She is bluffing. She is not bluffing. The lawyer choked out, beads of sweat breaking out across his forehead. Preston Onyx Capital is the firm. They are the apex predator equity group that bought your commercial mortgage on Wednesday. They bought out the secondary lenders on Thursday. They bought the private investor notes this morning. Onyx Capital holds 100% of your liabilities. The lawyer looked at me, his eyes wide with absolute unadulterated terror. The signature on the debt acquisition transfers. It was yours. You are the CEO. I replied, my voice dangerously calm. And you are sitting in my chair. Preston staggered backward, hitting the edge of the wet bar. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The arrogant, untouchable white patriarch was suddenly struggling to draw oxygen into his lungs. The mathematical reality of his total destruction was finally overriding his supreme delusion. Beatrice and Serena, however, lacked the financial literacy to understand the magnitude of what had just happened. They only understood social hierarchies and respectability politics. What does this mean? Beatrice demanded, looking between the terrified lawyer and her hyperventilating son-in-law. Preston, what is he talking about? Just force her to sign the new papers. We have a gala to get back to. Serena stamped her foot, crossing her arms tightly. This is ridiculous. She is lying, Mom. She works at some pathetic little office. She does not own anything. Kiara, stop playing these stupid games and take responsibility for what you did to the orphanage fund. You are ruining my night. I slowly pushed my chair back and stood up. The movement was fluid, dominant, radiating absolute authority. I walked around the ink-stained table, my black gown sweeping across the floor, until I stood directly in front of my mother and sister. You have spent your entire lives judging people by the labels they wear, I said, my voice resonating off the soundproof walls. You looked at my unbranded suits and assumed I was a low-level corporate worker. You looked at my natural hair and assumed I was unpolished. You looked at my lack of a husband and assumed I was worthless. I took a step closer, forcing Beatrice to crane her neck to look up at me. You told everyone I worked at a firm. I do not work at a firm, Beatrice. I own the firm. I built it from the ground up after you threw me out into the rain. I built an empire while you were busy playing dress-up and begging for validation from a society that does not even respect you. Serena scoffed, though her voice wavered slightly. You do not own anything that matters to us. I own everything that matters to you, I corrected her, my tone dropping to a lethal whisper. I am not just the CEO of Onyx Capital. I am the sole entity holding the paper on your entire miserable existence. I own the commercial mortgage on Preston's bankrupt real estate development company. I own the high-interest loans on the fleet of luxury cars you drive. And most importantly, Serena, I own the predatory secondary mortgage on that massive suburban mansion you love taking selfies in. Serena gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Beatrice stumbled backward as if I had physically struck her. You see, I continued pacing slowly around them, letting the reality of their doom sink in. When Preston realized the federal authorities were closing in on the $5 million you all embezzled from the Genesis Orphanage Fund, he panicked. He tried to scramble for capital. He thought his debt was scattered across a dozen different banks and private lenders. He thought he could outrun them. I stopped next to the terrified lawyer. He did not know that a single ruthless entity was aggressively buying up every single cent of his debt. He did not know that the entity was me. You brought me here tonight to force me to take the fall for your crimes. You thought you were sacrificing a helpless lamb. You did not realize you were locking yourselves in a cage with a lion. This is illegal! Beatrice shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. You cannot do this to your own family. We are your blood. Blood? I laughed, a sharp, cold sound that held absolutely no humor. You forfeited the right to use that word 12 years ago. You are not my family. You are a liability. And in my line of work, we liquidate liabilities. The lawyer was frantically packing his briefcase. He wanted no part of this. He knew that Onyx Capital had the resources to disbar him if he was found complicit in an extortion attempt. Preston, I am withdrawing as your counsel, the lawyer stammered, backing toward the locked mahogany doors. I cannot represent you in this. This is financial suicide. You cannot leave. Preston shouted, his voice cracking hysterically. You work for me. He worked for the illusion of your money, I corrected Preston softly. And that illusion just evaporated. Beatrice began to hyperventilate. The immaculate, composed First Lady of the megachurch was clutching her chest, her perfectly styled hair suddenly looking completely disheveled. She looked at me not as a daughter, but as a terrifying, unrecognizable force of nature. Kiara, please. Beatrice whispered, the arrogance finally draining from her voice, replaced by raw, unadulterated panic. You cannot take our home. You cannot take the cars. What will the congregation think? What will the city think? We will be ruined. You ruined yourselves, I replied, my gaze unyielding. I just bought the receipts. I turned back to Marcus and gave a slight nod. My lead corporate litigator unclasped his own black leather briefcase. He did not pull out fake ink-soaked confessions. He pulled out thick, legally binding, court-approved execution orders. He handed the stack to me. I walked back to the oak table and began dealing the documents like a brutal, inevitable deck of tarot cards. This first stack of paper, I said, dropping a heavy packet right in front of Serena, is the immediate foreclosure notice for the 10,000 square foot estate in Alpharetta. Since your husband leveraged the property using an aggressive commercial bridge loan that defaulted exactly 4 hours ago, the grace period is 0. The county sheriff has already been notified. You have until Monday morning to vacate the premises. Serena stared at the packet. Her hands began to tremble so violently that her diamond tennis bracelet rattled against her wrist. You are evicting me, she gasped, the air leaving her lungs. You are making me homeless. You made me homeless in a rainstorm when I was 17, I replied without a single ounce of pity. I am giving you a weekend to pack. Consider that a highly generous upgrade. I dropped the second stack of documents in front of Preston. These are the asset seizure authorizations for your corporate fleet. The 2 Mercedes-Benz SUVs, the Porsche, and the corporate jet share you claim to own. The recovery agents have already disabled the GPS tracking and locked the ignitions remotely. Those vehicles belong to Onyx Capital now. If you try to drive them away from this venue, you will be arrested for grand theft auto. Finally, I turned to Beatrice. My mother was clutching her throat, her chest heaving as she tried to process the total annihilation of her social standing. I dropped the final document at her feet. And this, mother, is the lien execution on the personal assets you used to collateralize Preston's initial startup loans 7 years ago. You thought you were being a supportive mother-in-law by putting up your personal savings and the deed to your vacation home in Hilton Head. You bet your own security on a man who despises you. Those assets are now officially the property of my firm. Beatrice let out a high, thin wail. You cannot do this to me. I am a respected elder in this community. I am the First Lady of Charity. I will lose everything. You lost everything the moment you decided to steal $5 million from orphans to fund your fake lifestyle. I corrected her, my voice echoing off the soundproof walls. You built your entire identity on the illusion of righteousness. I'm just holding up the mirror. Preston could not handle it. The reality of his complete and total subjugation by a black woman he had deemed inferior finally broke his fragile, arrogant mind. The smug, untouchable developer vanished, replaced by a cornered, rabid animal. His face twisted into a mask of pure, unfiltered rage. He let out a feral roar and lunged across the space separating us. "You ungrateful bitch!" Preston screamed, his hands reaching like claws for my throat. "I will kill you." He never even made it within 3 feet of me. Before I could even flinch, Elias moved with the terrifying speed of a former federal operative. He stepped directly into Preston's path, catching him by the lapels of his custom tuxedo. Elias used Preston's own momentum against him, twisting his body and slamming him face first into the heavy oak-paneled wall. The impact rattled the framed artwork and shook the grandfather clock in the corner. Marcus stepped in immediately to secure Preston's legs, kicking his knees apart to force him into a spread eagle submission. Elias drove his forearm into the back of Preston's neck, pinning him immovably against the wood. Preston struggled wildly, kicking and thrashing, but my security detail held him with absolute effortless control. "Get off me!" Preston gagged, his face squished against the wall, spittle flying from his lips. "I am going to destroy you. I will send those forged documents to the feds right now. I will make sure you rot in a cell for the rest of your life." I calmly walked over to where Preston was pinned. I stood just inches from his ear, my black silk gown brushing against his polished shoes. I leaned in, keeping my voice incredibly soft and lethal. "You really thought you were the smartest person in the room," I whispered. "You thought you could forge my signature on those shell company documents and frame me for your financial crimes. You thought because you used my old social security number, the trap was foolproof." Preston stopped struggling. He turned his head just enough to look at me, his eyes wide with desperate malice. "It is foolproof," he hissed. "The FBI will see your name. They will see your number. You are going down." I smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had already won the war before the first shot was even fired. "Preston," I said, shaking my head slowly, "did you honestly believe a premier cybersecurity and corporate espionage firm would not audit my own name? My team discovered your pathetic forged documents 6 months ago. We did not just find them, we traced them. We deployed military-grade forensic software and tracked the exact internet protocol addresses used to generate, sign, and submit those fraudulent applications." Preston's breathing hitched. His eyes darted back and forth wildly. "We traced the digital footprints directly back to your home office." I continued, driving the final nail into his coffin. "We traced them to your personal laptop. We traced them to your specific network router. We have the metadata, the timestamps, and the geolocation coordinates, proving exactly when and where you forged my signature." I stepped back, allowing him to absorb the absolute magnitude of his failure. "I did not come here today to beg you to hide those documents," I declared, my voice ringing with total victory. "My legal team already handed the real forensic evidence over to the Federal Bureau of Investigation on Wednesday morning. The feds do not have your fake narrative, Preston. They have the raw, undeniable proof that you committed identity theft, wire fraud, and grand larceny. They know exactly who the mastermind is." Preston sagged against the wall, his legs giving out. If Elias had not been pinning him up, he would have collapsed onto the floor. The fight completely left his body. He realized he was not just broke. He was going to spend the rest of his natural life in a federal penitentiary. Serena began to sob uncontrollably, sinking to the floor in her designer gown, her hands covering her face. Beatrice stood frozen like a statue, staring at the wall, her mind unable to compute the absolute destruction of her pristine, carefully crafted world. The trap was not just closed, it was locked, welded shut, and thrown into the abyss. The silence in the VIP lounge was profound, broken only by Serena gasping for air on the carpet, and Preston struggling fruitlessly against Elias. Then the shock finally wore off my mother. The reality of losing her wealth, her home, and her immaculate reputation fractured the last remaining shreds of her sanity. Beatrice snapped. She lunged forward, her hands curled into fists, her eyes blazing with a desperate, frantic hatred. Marcus shifted his weight to intercept her, but I held up my hand, signaling him to hold his position. I allowed her to storm right up to me. "You are a monster!" Beatrice screamed, her voice tearing through her throat, echoing harshly against the oak-paneled walls. "You are a vile, ungrateful monster. We are your blood. We are your family. You come in here dressed in your little costume and you destroy everything I have built. Everything. You are ruining your own sister. You are destroying a good, respected man who gave us everything you never could. Preston is a pillar of this community. He is a provider. He took care of us when you vanished. And you are doing this just because you have always been a bitter, jealous, wicked girl who cannot stand to see anyone else happy. Her chest heaved, the veins in her neck strained against her diamond collar. She was clinging to her delusion, with a terrifying ferocity, absolutely refusing to accept that the white man she had worshipped was the architect of her destruction. To her, I was still the villain. I was the dark, nappy-haired disruption to her perfectly assimilated white adjacent fantasy. I did not raise my voice. I did not blink. I looked down at the woman who gave birth to me and felt absolutely nothing. You think he is a good man? I asked, my voice carrying a quiet, lethal edge. You think he is a pillar of the community who respects you. You think he actually loves your golden child. You sold your soul, your congregation, and your own daughter to sit at his table, Beatrice. Let us hear exactly what he thinks of his dinner guests. I reached into the pocket of my gown and pulled out my phone. I synced it to the high-fidelity surround sound system wired into the ceiling of the VIP lounge. I tapped the screen once. A brief burst of static hissed from the hidden speakers above our heads, followed by the unmistakable sound of ice clinking against a crystal glass. Then Preston's arrogant, drunken drawl filled the room, amplified and inescapable. God, I cannot stand these people, Preston's voice sneered from the speakers, the raw contempt vibrating through the air. These ignorant church people practically hand me their money just because Beatrice vouches for me. They are so desperate for a white savior in a tailored suit to validate their little country club aspirations. It is pathetic. Beatrice froze. The breath was literally punched out of her lungs. Her jaw dropped, her eyes wide as the sound of her precious son-in-law mocking her entire congregation washed over her. The recording continued merciless and crystal clear. And Serena, the recorded voice scoffed, letting out a cruel, dismissive laugh. Beatrice thinks I married her daughter out of love. Serena is just a dumb, expensive prop. A diversity mascot I parade around to make these wealthy black investors feel comfortable handing over their retirement funds. She spends my money like a child playing dress-up, but as long as she keeps smiling and playing the obedient little housewife, she serves her purpose. They all do. I tapped my screen, stopping the audio. The silence slammed back into the room with the force of a physical blow. Preston stopped fighting against Elias. His face drained of all color, turning a sickly, translucent gray. He looked like a man who had just watched his own execution. On the floor, Serena let out a sound that I will never forget. It was not a fake theatrical sob designed to garner sympathy. It was a guttural, agonizing shriek of pure, unadulterated devastation. The illusion of her perfect marriage, the foundation of her entire identity, shattered into a million jagged pieces. She realized in a single brutal second that her husband did not love her. He had never loved her. She was nothing more than a racial prop, a convenient, beautiful tool he used to infiltrate her mother network and rob her own people. Serena scrambled to her knees, her designer gown tangling around her legs. Her mascara ran in dark, ugly rivers down her cheeks. "You used me!" she screamed at Preston, her voice cracking hysterically. "You used me! I gave you everything! I stole for you! I lied for you! You told me we were a team!" Preston could not even look at her. He kept his eyes squeezed shut, pressing his forehead against the wooden paneling. "It is a fake," Preston mumbled weakly, his voice trembling. "It is fabricated. She manufactured it to frame me." Nobody believed him. The disgust in his recorded voice had been too visceral, too authentic. I turned my attention back to Beatrice. My mother was paralyzed. She stood absolutely rigid, staring at the empty space between us. Her perfect manicured world had just been violently ripped apart. She had sacrificed her 17-year-old daughter to the rain and the streets to protect her status. She had stolen $5 million from parentless children to maintain her proximity to white wealth. She had sold out her own community, all for a man who viewed her as a pathetic, desperate joke. The sheer magnitude of her own foolishness crashed down on her shoulders, rendering her entirely mute. She could not scream, she could not cry, she was utterly hollowed out from the inside. "You threw me away for a man who hates you," I said, my voice cutting through Serena, hysterical sobbing. "You thought proximity to his whiteness made you elite. You thought it made you untouchable. But he was just holding the leash, Beatrice. He laughed at you behind your back while he drained your community dry." I stepped closer, invading her space, forcing her to look at me. "Look at the monster you created," I commanded softly. "I am the daughter you threw away. I am the one who built a legitimate empire while you built a criminal enterprise based on self-hatred. You wanted to play respectability politics, Mother. Let us see how respectable you look in a pair of federal handcuffs." Beatrice swayed slightly on her feet, her eyes vacant and terrified. I turned away from her and looked at Marcus. "The private show is over," I declared, adjusting the cuffs of my silk gown. "It is time for the main event. Hook my phone into the master audiovisual network for the grand ballroom downstairs. Let the congregation hear their golden boy speak." Marcus did not hesitate. He tapped a single encrypted command on his secure tablet. I turned and signaled to Elias, who stepped forward, unbolted the heavy mahogany doors of the VIP lounge and threw them wide open. The muffled sounds of the grand ballroom below instantly rushed into our space. The clinking of crystal champagne flutes, the soft, elegant hum of string instruments, and the polite applause of the Atlanta elite floated up to the mezzanine. It was the sound of a perfect, undisturbed high society evening. I stepped out onto the marble balcony overlooking the massive atrium, forcing Beatrice, Serena, and Preston to stumble out behind me and witness their own apocalypse. Down below, a prominent church elder was standing at the grand podium, bathed in a warm spotlight. He was midway through a glowing introductory speech. He was praising Preston for his visionary real estate developments and thanking Beatrice for her tireless dedication to the Genesis orphanage. The crowd of nearly 2,000 people was listening with rapt attention. Women in designer gowns and men in tailored tuxedos nodded along, entirely captivated by the illusion of their benevolence. Then the screens went dark. The transition was brutal and instantaneous. The soft classical music piping through the ballroom speakers cut off with a harsh, ear-splitting screech of electronic feedback. Several guests gasped in shock, spilling their drinks across white linen tablecloths. The warm ambient lighting plunged into pitch black. For 5 agonizing seconds, the grand ballroom was completely silent, swallowed by total confusion. Then the 2 massive 20-foot light-emitting diode screens framing the main stage flared back to life. They did not display the church logo or the Charity Foundation crest. They displayed a stark, high-definition audio waveform pulsing in neon green. Preston, arrogant, drunken voice, blasted through the state-of-the-art concert speakers, amplified to a deafening volume that physically shook the crystal chandeliers overhead. "God, I cannot stand these people." The sound of his voice slammed into the crowd like a freight train. I watched from the balcony as thousands of faces tilted upward in pure, unadulterated shock. Down in the front row, the mayor of Atlanta stiffened in his seat. Church elders exchanged horrified glances. These ignorant church people practically hand me their money just because Beatrice vouches for me. They are so desperate for a white savior in a tailored suit to validate their little country club aspirations. It is pathetic. A collective gasp ripped through the ballroom. The absolute unfiltered racism echoing from the speakers paralyzed the room. I glanced back at Preston. He was gripping the balcony railing. His knuckles bone white, his eyes wide with a terror so profound it looked like he might go into cardiac arrest. He was watching his entire social and professional life disintegrate in real time, broadcast to every single person he had ever tried to impress. The broadcast did not stop. Serena's name echoed through the cavernous hall next. And Serena. Beatrice thinks I married her daughter out of love. Serena is just a dumb, expensive prop. A diversity mascot I parade around to make these wealthy black investors feel comfortable handing over their retirement funds. Down on the main floor, women who had just been praising Serena's custom gown covered their mouths in horror. Serena collapsed against the balcony railing beside me, burying her face in her arms, unable to hide from the thousands of eyes that suddenly darted up to the mezzanine to look at her. She was entirely exposed, humiliated before the very high society she had sold her soul to assimilate into. But the audio was only the opening act. The visual assault began immediately. The audio waveform on the 20-foot screens vanished, replaced by crystal-clear, high-definition images of bank ledgers. A bright red laser pointer graphic guided the audience's eyes across the screen. The header read, "Genesis Orphanage Fund Master Ledger." The crowd began to murmur a low rumble of growing panic and absolute outrage. The screen displayed the $5 million in stolen assets. The red line tracked the outgoing wire transfers directly from the church charity account into the Cayman Islands offshore holding company. The massive screens split in half. On the left side, they displayed the offshore account registration clearly listing Preston and Serena as the sole proprietors. On the right side, they displayed the authorization signatures for the stolen funds. Beatrice's signature was projected 20 feet high for every single member of her congregation to see. The murmurs in the ballroom erupted into a chaotic roar. People were standing up from their tables, knocking over chairs. Wealthy investors who had handed Preston their retirement savings were shouting at the top of their lungs. Church members who had donated their hard-earned money to help parentless children were pointing up at the balcony, their faces twisted in absolute fury. The sheer scale of the betrayal ignited the room into a frenzy. The screen shifted one final time. They displayed the forged loan documents alongside the metadata, the internet protocol addresses, and the geolocation coordinates, proving Preston had committed identity theft from his own home office to frame me. A bold white text overlay appeared across the bottom of the screens. Evidence submitted to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Internal Revenue Service. Total unmitigated pandemonium broke out. The string quartet had fled the stage. The church elders were frantically talking into their radios, trying to regain control of a crowd that was rapidly turning into an angry mob. Several furious investors were actually trying to push past the security guards at the base of the grand staircase, screaming Preston's name, demanding their money back. I stood perfectly still at the edge of the balcony, looking down at the chaos. I had promised to roll out the red carpet for the federal agents, and my team had delivered a masterpiece. I turned to look at my mother. Beatrice was gripping the marble pillar, her chest heaving, as she stared down at the angry congregation she had manipulated for decades. They were not looking at her with reverence anymore. They were looking at her like she was a monster. "You wanted a spectacle, Mother," I said, my voice cutting through the noise of the rioting ballroom. "I hope you enjoy the view from the top, because the fall is going to break every single bone in your body." Outside the thick glass windows of the grand atrium, a flashing sea of red and blue lights illuminated the night sky. The sirens wailed, growing louder by the second, piercing through the shouting crowd. The authorities had arrived, and the final curtain was about to fall on their fake empire. The heavy glass doors of the grand atrium burst open with concussive force. The tactical Federal Bureau of Investigation agents, flanked by heavily armed local Atlanta police officers, swarmed into the chaotic ballroom. The furious crowd of investors and church members instantly parted for the authorities. They locked their sights on the mezzanine level and began marching in terrifying synchronization up the grand marble staircase. I stood perfectly still, watching the inevitable consequences of 12 years of arrogance approaching. A fleeing waiter bumped the railing, shattering a tray of crystal flutes. I reached down and picked up the single glass that remained perfectly upright. I turned to face my mother, my sister, and my brother-in-law. Preston hyperventilated, searching for a non-existent exit. Beatrice clutched her chest, muttering desperate prayers. Serena was curled on the floor, ruining her designer gown in a puddle of spilled wine. I raised the crystal glass into the air, catching the flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the ceiling. "To family," I said, my voice smooth and utterly devoid of mercy. Right as the word left my lips, the heavy mahogany doors of the VIP lounge behind us were kicked completely off their hinges. The federal agents swarmed the balcony immediately, Get on the ground, the lead agent roared, drawing his weapon and aiming it squarely at Preston's chest. The arrogant tycoon dropped to his knees, scrambling backward like a frightened child. Agent slammed him face first against the marble floor, cracking his nose. I am a respected businessman, Preston screamed, spitting blood onto the pristine white tiles. You cannot do this to me. Call my lawyer, I know people. You have the right to remain silent, the agent barked, snapping heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists. You are being placed under arrest for federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement. The agents hauled Preston to his feet. He looked pathetic. His tuxedo was torn, hair-matted blood dripping from his nose onto his white shirt. They dragged him roughly toward the staircase. Downstairs, local news crews had breached the perimeter. Preston tried to turn his face away, but an agent shoved him forward. The cameras captured every single angle of the disgraced white savior being paraded through a crowd of the very black investors he had systematically robbed. The congregation jeered, throwing crumpled programs and half-empty cups at him as he was dragged out the front doors and shoved into the back of a waiting armored federal vehicle. While the authorities processed the scene, the senior executive church elders approached. Beatrice scrambled to her feet, wiping her ruined makeup, trying to reclaim her pious facade. Brothers, Beatrice gasped, her hands trembling as she reached out to the head pastor. We have been framed. The devil is working through my wicked daughter to test this holy congregation. The head pastor did not take her hand. He looked at her with profound disgust. Do not invoke the Lord, the pastor commanded with righteous fury. You stole from orphans. You took from parentless children to fund this sick charade. You are a disgrace to this community. The pastor cut her off. Hand over your church credentials, right now. You are stripped of your titles and permanently excommunicated. Hand over the keys to the philanthropic offices before I have the police arrest you for trespassing. Beatrice let out a hollow, agonizing gasp. Her hands shook violently as she unclipped the gold church badge from her silver gown and dropped the heavy ring of office keys into the pastor-waiting palm. The elders turned their backs on her simultaneously and walked away. The brutal social exile was absolute. Beatrice had nothing left. No congregation, no status, no power. She was just a common thief standing in a ruined dress. Serena remained curled on the floor. Her husband was on his way to federal prison. Her mother was publicly disgraced. The mansion she loved so much was already foreclosed by my firm. Her fake empire was shattered. She looked up at me, her face swollen, her false eyelashes running in thick black streaks down her cheeks. Kiara Serena sobbed, reaching out a trembling hand to grab the hem of my black silk gown. Please, please do not leave me like this. I have nowhere to go. I have nothing. I looked at the woman who had watched our mother throw me away, who begged me to take the fall. I gently but firmly pulled the fabric of my dress out of her desperate grip. You have exactly what you earned, Serena, I replied, my voice echoing with finality. You wanted to live a life built on lies. Now you get to live in the rubble. I turned my back on my biological family for the very last time. I nodded to Elias and Marcus. My chosen family fell into step beside me. I walked down the grand marble staircase, my head held high, stepping effortlessly over their ruined reputations. Camera flashes caught my silhouette as I walked into the refreshing Atlanta night. I climbed into the back of my waiting armored vehicle, leaving the burning wreckage of their kingdom far behind me. Let them rot in the prison of their own making. I stared out the tinted window as my driver pulled away from the curb, my heartbeat steady and victorious. The girl they kicked out into the rain had finally brought the storm back to their doorstep, and she did not leave a single survivor in her wake. This entire glittering city belonged to me now. My mother had promised I would return begging, but I returned as a conqueror, instead dismantling the toxic hierarchy that had suffocated me for 17 years. I closed my eyes and smiled into the darkness of the cabin, savoring the unparalleled sweetness of absolute justice. I was ready to forge ahead, untouched and completely unbothered by the massive pile of ashes I left behind in Atlanta today. Exactly 1 month passed since that glorious, chaotic night in Atlanta. The fallout was not just absolute, it was a masterclass in total systemic annihilation. The federal prosecutors did not offer Preston a single shred of leniency. The evidence my team provided was so airtight, so overwhelmingly conclusive, that his high-priced defense attorneys abandoned him when his retainer checks bounced. He was staring down the barrel of 20 consecutive years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. His arrogant smirk had been completely wiped away, replaced by the terrified realization that his white privilege could not shield him from a multi-million-dollar federal indictment. He was just another inmate now, stripped of his tailored suits and his fake prestige. Serena experienced a different, but equally poetic kind of destruction. When Monday morning arrived after the gala, my asset recovery agents executed the eviction order at the Alpharetta estate with absolute precision. She was given exactly 30 minutes to pack a single suitcase under the watchful eyes of armed security. Every piece of designer furniture, every diamond necklace bought with stolen orphanage funds was seized and liquidated by Onyx Capital. Her wealthy Charity League friends stopped answering her calls immediately. Her social currency plummeted to zero. Last I heard from my investigators, my golden sister was living in a dingy, poorly lit hourly motel on the outskirts of the city, pawning her remaining counterfeit handbags just to afford basic groceries. The woman who had sneered at my clothes was now sleeping on a cheap mattress with a broken air conditioning unit rattling in the window. But the most spectacular downfall belonged to Beatrice. The church elders did not just strip her of her titles, they cooperated fully with the authorities. The local district attorney, working in tandem with the federal investigators, indicted my mother on 72 counts of wire fraud, charity embezzlement, and conspiracy. The woman who had spent her entire life judging the morality of others from her holy pedestal was unceremoniously arrested in the driveway of her heavily mortgaged suburban home, shoved into the back of a police cruiser for the entire neighborhood to see. I was sitting in my corner office in Manhattan, watching the morning sun reflect off the glass skyscrapers of the financial district. My desk was clear, my mind was sharp, and my empire was thriving. Elias walked into my office and placed a single file on the glass table. It was the final liquidation report. Every cent of the stolen orphanage money had been recovered from the sale of Preston and Serena assets and anonymously donated back to the church foundation through a blind trust. I had cleaned up their mess, kept my profit margin intact, and completely erased them from the financial ecosystem. My private phone rang. It was not a corporate contact. The caller ID displayed an incoming routing number from the Fulton County Correctional Facility. I leaned back in my leather chair and answered the call. An automated mechanical voice informed me that I was receiving a collect call from an inmate. I pressed the button to accept the charges. The line crackled with harsh static, followed by the sound of frantic, ragged breathing. "Kiara!" The voice was high-pitched, trembling, and entirely stripped of its usual commanding arrogance. It was Beatrice. She sounded weak, terrified, and utterly desperate. "Kiara, please tell me you are there. Please do not hang up the phone." I did not say a word. I simply let her speak into the silence, forcing her to bear the entire weight of her own humiliation. "I need your help," Beatrice sobbed, her voice breaking as she wept openly into the jailhouse receiver. "The conditions in here are a nightmare. They took my clothes. They put me in a cell with violent criminals. The food is rotten. The guards look at me like I'm an animal. You have to get me out of here, Kiara. The bail is set at $500,000. I know you have the money. I know you can afford it. Please, I am begging you. Call your lawyers and wire the bail money today." She paused, gasping for air, waiting for me to offer the grace she had never once extended to me. When I remained completely silent, her desperation escalated into full-blown panic. "You cannot leave me in this place," she pleaded, playing the ultimate pathetic card she had left. "Kiara, I am your mother. I gave you life. I raised you. You cannot abandon your own mother to rot in a county jail cell. Please have mercy on me." I looked out the window at the sprawling, magnificent city below me. I felt a profound, untouchable calm wash over my entire body. I had waited 12 long years for this exact conversation. You kicked me out in the freezing rain when I was 17 years old, I said, my voice icy precise and completely devoid of emotion. You threw my clothes onto the street to protect a thief. You stood on that porch and screamed that I would come crawling back, begging on my knees within a month. Beatrice let out a strangled, pathetic whimper on the other end of the line. I did not beg. I continued, my words striking like surgical steel. I built a legitimate empire while you built a house of cards. Now, 12 years later, you are the one sitting in a cage. You are the one crying and begging on your knees. But I am not your daughter anymore, Beatrice. I am just your primary creditor, and your account is permanently closed. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I could hear her screaming my name through the tiny speaker, her voice dissolving into pure, unadulterated despair. I pressed the red button and ended the call. I opened my network settings, selected the Fulton County Correctional Facility routing number, and permanently blocked it. I deleted her contact file. I erased the call log. With a few simple swipes of my finger, I completely and utterly scrubbed her existence from my reality. The slate was entirely clean. The slate was entirely clean. I set the phone down on the polished marble desk and took a deep, cleansing breath that filled my lungs with the sweet, intoxicating air of total liberation. I walked over to the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse office. The sprawling concrete jungle of Manhattan stretched out before me, bathed in the warm golden light of the late afternoon sun. Millions of people were moving through the streets below, each carrying their own burdens, their own histories, their own desperate fights for survival. For the first time in 12 long years, I was not carrying mine. I searched my heart for any lingering trace of bitterness, any residual anger toward the people who shared my DNA. There was absolutely nothing. The heavy, suffocating weight that had rested on my shoulders since that rainy night in Atlanta had completely evaporated. I did not hate Beatrice. I did not hate Serena. I simply felt an overwhelming, profound sense of absolute freedom. They had tried to bury me under their vanity and their greed, but they did not realize I was a seed. I had taken root in the dark, and I had grown into an impenetrable fortress. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant shades of violet and crushed orange. Behind me, the heavy oak doors of the boardroom opened. The sharp, clinical atmosphere of the corporate workspace had been entirely transformed. My executive staff had seamlessly converted the adjoining private dining terrace into an elegant, warm, and inviting sanctuary. A long mahogany table was set with fine bone china crystal stemware and low flickering candles that cast a soft golden glow across the room. I was not hosting corrupt politicians, fake philanthropists, or arrogant real estate developers looking to exploit their own communities. I was hosting my actual family. Elias walked in first, trading his usual tactical earpiece and severe expression for a relaxed smile and a tailored charcoal suit. Marcus followed close behind, holding a bottle of vintage champagne, laughing loudly at a joke made by my chief financial officer. Then came the others. Sarah, the diner manager, who had let me sleep in the back booth during my first month of homelessness, wore a beautiful silk dress I had gifted her. David, the rogue venture capitalist, who had looked at a 19-year-old black girl with a brilliant tech proposal and decided to write my very first seed funding check instead of laughing me out of his office. These were the people who had clothed me, fed me, and protected me when my own mother had left me to freeze on the streets. They did not care about my proximity to whiteness. They did not care about respectability, politics, church status, or country club memberships. They cared about my character, my drive, and my heart. I walked toward the table, feeling a radiant, genuine warmth spreading through my chest. There was no anxiety here. There was no need to perform to shrink myself or to carefully curate my words to avoid a psychological ambush. We sat down together, passing plates of incredible food, pouring wine, and sharing stories that filled the penthouse with loud, authentic, unapologetic joy. I looked around the table at these brilliant, fiercely loyal individuals. They had stood by me when I was nothing but a frightened runaway, and they had stood shoulder to shoulder with me as I burned a fraudulent empire to the ground. This was what true loyalty looked like. It was not a weapon used to demand blind obedience. It was a shield forged in mutual respect. As the dinner wound down and the city lights sparkled like diamonds outside the glass, Elias tapped his knife against his champagne flute. The room quieted, all eyes turning to me with unwavering affection. I picked up my glass and stood at the head of the table. I looked at each of their faces, feeling the profound magnitude of this victory. For a very long time, I began my voice steady and resonant. I believed the greatest lie ever sold to us. I believed that family loyalty was an unbreakable contract written in blood. We are taught that we must endure disrespect, manipulation, and outright abuse simply because the people hurting us happen to share our last name. We are conditioned to set ourselves on fire just to keep our toxic relatives warm. But that is not loyalty. That is a trap. It is a psychological prison designed to keep you small, compliant, and easy to exploit. I raised my glass slightly higher, the crystal catching the candlelight. True power does not come from suffering in silence to protect the people who abuse you. True power comes from having the absolute courage to look at a toxic environment and walk away with your dignity intact. It comes from refusing to be a sacrificial lamb for someone else's fragile ego. When my biological family threw me out, they told me I would be back begging on my knees. They thought my value was tied to their validation. But I learned that your worth is not determined by the people who are too blind to see it. If they refuse to give you a seat at their table, you do not beg for a chair. You walk away, you buy the entire building, and you build your own empire. The room remained completely silent, hanging on to every single word. I looked at Sarah, at David, at Marcus, and at Elias. You do not owe your soul to the people who broke you, I said, my heart swelling with immense gratitude. You owe it to the people who helped you put the pieces back together. You are my family. You are my empire. And tonight we toast to absolute freedom. They raised their glasses high, their voices joining together in a resounding, joyous cheer. The sound echoed through the penthouse, ringing out over the glittering skyline of New York City. I took a sip of the cold, crisp champagne. I lowered the glass and looked out at the boundless horizon. There were no more ghosts hiding in the shadows. There were no more debts to collect. I had won the only war that truly mattered. A genuine, radiant, and entirely victorious smile broke across my face, shining brighter than the city lights below. The screen fades to black. The profound lesson here is that toxicity disguised as family loyalty is a dangerous trap. You are never obligated to endure manipulation simply because you share a bloodline. True power comes from having the courage to walk away with your dignity intact. Your worth is not defined by those who break you, but by your resilience to build your own success. Family is not about shared DNA. It is about those who actively protect and uplift you. Stop begging for a seat at a toxic table. Please share your powerful stories of walking away from toxic environments in the comments.